We'll call to order this meeting of the Stoughton Area School District Board of Education. Ms. Egan, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Bougon?
Here.
Mr. Coughlin?
Here.
Mr. Fry?
Here.
Ms. Fitzgibbon? Here. Ms. Hoppy? Here. Mr. Jackson?
Here.
Ms. Patterson? Here. Ms. Swart? Here. President Sullivan?
Here. Next on the agenda is public comment. If anyone would like to address the board, we invite you at this time to approach the podium and speak to us on a topic near and dear to your heart for a time not to exceed 3 minutes. I see no one approaching. Next on the agenda is the legislative update.
All righty. On Wednesday of last week, I met with Representative Gary Hebel, and he has tried for 6 terms to be on the Education Committee for the state and been turned down every year. Now he's on it, and he wants to know what we want. I mean, he's like really open to everything, so keep that in your thoughts. In other news, the state council study committee on the identification and management of dyslexia has put forth new legislation on screening and intervention for that. Then there's a piece about tax assessments and the whole big box thing, which they call dark stores, that they don't want to pay taxes basically, and they're big and they have a lot of sway. But the problem is that shifts the tax burden to property owners and to small businesses. So it's being opposed in 35 of our school districts, and I'll keep an eye on it. The Blue Ribbon Commission, we have a thing at the convention this week, so we'll have a report after that. And I think that does it. Oh, the state of the state addresses tomorrow night.
That should be interesting. Any questions or comments from anyone? John?
Is are Senator Miller and Representative Hebel coming to the library on Wednesday?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
I have a separate meeting set up with Mark Miller, but yeah, Gary was really on top of everything going on in Stoughton and the schools.
Great.
It was a good meeting.
I was just going to mention that meeting at the library at 6:30 Wednesday.
Probably most of us are not available on Wednesday.
Okay. Thank you, Kathleen.
Sure.
Next on the agenda, we have the Spotlight on Learning, which features tonight the Stoughton High School North Star staff. Matching t-shirts are a great start.
I like them.
And the one thing I'll say is that whoever's talking should try and be close to the microphone so it can pick up.
Sounds good, thank you.
I think that's going down.
I guess we can start by introducing ourselves. So we're the North Star. For those of you who don't know, we're the news magazine at the high school, and we're a student-run publication, along with our advisor, Miss Laura Striley. And I guess we'll just start by introducing ourselves. I'm Colin Ace, I'm the editor-in-chief.
My name is Charlie, I'm the associate editor-in-chief. My name is Hannah Moody, I'm the in-depth editor. My name is Ava Paulette, I'm the entertainment editor.
My name is Luke Geister-Jones, and I'm a staff writer.
I'm Laura Striley, and I'm their advisor. I'd also like to point out that Hannah does the business as well, and we have other, and copy editor. Yeah, so they have a few hats that they wear.
So for those of you who don't know, the North Star, in addition to being an activity, is a class called Advanced Journalism, in which we are taught how to take the aspects of journalism that are taught in the Intro to Journalistic Writing course that Mr. Riley also teaches and apply that to like making a real life publication. Some of those topics include interviewing, writing, ethics, graphic design, and photography.
And on top of a class, it's also an activity. So our whole issue is about 28 pages, and each month we get together for page nights, and this is when we finish our layouts, finish doing final edits on stories, and get everything finalized. And so for those 3 months, that's when we put the issue together, and then we distribute the finished product to the rest of the school, usually in the last week of each month.
Oh, so this is the mission statement that we like to go by in all the articles and issues that we write. And it simply states, the mission of the North Star is to provide unbiased, factual, and interesting content that represents the whole of the community while promoting constructive discussion. We aim to inform the public to the best of our abilities while being open to new ideas and remaining relevant to the community.
So this is our process. The first step is to pitch. The North Star stories, ideas are found and decided upon by the student staff, meaning we decide what we write. Our second step is the writing process. Everyone on staff conducts their own interviews, takes their own pictures, and writes their own stories, and lays out their own pages in a program called InDesign. The next step after that is editing. The North Star staff consists of 6 editors, 1 for each section, who read each story and edit for content, grammar, and organization. The fourth step is laying out. Each writer puts their own stories into InDesign and goes through several rounds of edits, of layout editing, and copy editing. The fifth and final step is the most rewarding, which is distribution. We give our issues each month to members of our student body, staff, and community.
The staff consists of 17 students. There are 6 student editors, such as for the sections of sports, in-depth, entertainment, news, and so on. And then we have 11 staff writers, who are usually new to it's their first year on staff. And then we have 1 advisor, Miss Laura Striley. And we pride ourselves on the unique and diverse backgrounds and thoughts and ideas of our members.
So this year we had a really cool opportunity that Miss Striley won us in our raffle. We got to have a day essentially, an in-school field trip with help from professionals in the journalistic world. So this picture you see is Professor Vincent Felock. He is a journalism professor at UW Oshkosh and also a member of the Student Press Law Center. And he, as well as Linda Barrington, who is the president of the Kettle Moraine Press Association, worked with us in a day-long session and taught us all about how to take professional journalism standards and apply them to a high school setting.
So we just want to say thank you to everyone in the community who helps us. The North Star is immensely lucky to benefit from a district-wide editorial policy that doesn't require prior review. So that means that we have the ability to publish our stories without the risk of being censored by administration. With this power, we strive to act responsibly under the Code of Ethics to write stories that directly apply to student interests.
We have been very fortunate to win several awards. This year we won the All Kempa, which is the best in show at the Fall Journalism Conference. And individually, we have won 2 excellent for our articles, 3 superior, and 10 honorable mentions.
And finally, we'd just like to say thank you again for letting us come and present. And if you'd like to follow us on Instagram, it's right there.
And we'd like to open this up to questions that any of you might have. Yes.
I love reading it every month. And a few months back, there was an article about the Hmong community, and I just want to tell you, I really appreciated it. It was really timely, and it's a thing we discuss in our household a lot, but there's a lot of people celebrating in different ways, and they're all valid. The other question I wanted to ask is, do you have journalism class every day?
Yeah, so we meet every day, 7th hour for advanced journalism, and then some people on staff are also in the intro to journalistic class, which meets, I think there's 2 sections during the day that Mr. Riley teaches. Yeah, go ahead.
So, I've been reading the North Star for probably 15 years.
Since it was carved out stone.
Since it was carved out. I had three kids that went to Stoughton High School, but they did not participate on the North Star. However, it's been entertaining and sometimes controversial. So before I get into that, I wanted to just say how proud as a school board member and a member of the community I am of the publication, and all of the awards that you have earned are definitely deserving. So congratulations. The controversial articles are also interesting, and I applaud you for taking the effort and bringing those forward. So can you describe to me your process when there is a controversial article, and maybe you get some feedback from the community or peers, and how you process that?
Hi. In addition to associate editor-in-chief, I'm the opinions editor, so that's where a lot of the controversial articles come from.
So you take the heat?
Typically, when someone has an issue or like just comments on one of our articles, we really direct them to write a letter to the editor, which is they're allowed to write about 300 words, I believe, and that will be published in the North Star. So that way they can show their voices to the community that also received the controversial article, so they can have their words expressed and their ideas expressed too.
But do you guys as a group get together and say, do you talk about the controversy or do you talk about the feedback?
Yeah, oftentimes in class, after a controversial article gets some feedback, we all discuss it with each other, and maybe we'll think of ways to improve ourselves next time, or maybe we'll just discuss how to appropriately receive the response, especially when I know a while ago we had someone that had never written an article before that was controversial, so we discussed how for them to handle it appropriately.
Can I ask a follow-up on that? An issue we were aware of recent, probably your most recent snafu. I looked, well, yeah. I can't remember precisely, but was opinion, or if you read the paper, the Wisconsin State Journal, it often has this is the opinion of the I'm just curious if that's a policy now that you have.
So is the question whether they identify opinion pieces as
Clearly,
opinion pieces?
yes.
Yeah, they're all under the opinion section, so we also have a disclaimer that means the opinion of one person is not the opinion necessarily of the entire staff.
Exactly.
So yeah.
Yeah, our editorial policy often shows up in our editorial policy shows up in the table of contents in almost every issue, and that expressly states that any opinion columns that do not fall under our staff editorial are the opinion of the writer alone. And that includes, obviously, letters to the editor.
Can you all pick one story that you've done either this year or last year that you just really liked and felt like it made a difference in the school community, and tell us about it?
Okay, huddle.
Focus.
This is the editorial process.
As they're huddling, I'd just like to say that your question about whether it's prominently displayed or not, that it's opinion, is something that in the intro courses, there was a lot of discussion around the What Makes a Hero article, and just about kids who saw that as news. And so the question of opinion versus news and discussing that. So, yeah.
Ask the hard questions.
Ricky broke
question for the advisor or their advisor. Of all these years, the students that take the class and continue working with their papers, do you have an idea of how many of these kids, when they graduate, go into journalism?
That's a great question. So I think right now I know of one alumnus who is working at the hub in the greater Dane County area, and I also know another student who's at Whitewater and is on staff at that publication. But as far as students beyond that, in my time here, I'm not sure if they've gone on to journalism. I know that a lot of students on staff right now aren't seriously looking into going into journalism, but there are some students who are going for Journalist of the Year, so maybe they'll consider. But yeah, so
Thank you.
So we had some difficulty picking one as a group, so we're each just gonna pick one that we really liked. So my choice was our November in-depth, which I don't know if you guys had a chance to read. It was about waste production and reduction in the community. That's an article that I wrote with a fellow editor. And so it was really cool. It was a cool experience. We got to explore the amount of waste that our community, both at the school, citywide, and like nationally creates, as well as the fact, yes, that one right there.
Yeah.
We went to the Dane County Sanitary Landfill and took those pictures, and it was kind of cool, but also really sad. And I think it just was a really cool way to highlight an issue that a lot of people don't think about unless it's Earth Day or something like that.
So the one I decided on was one that I wrote, I don't remember which month, but it was this year, and it was on how a policy in the student handbook has changed. And I thought it was just in the beginning of the school year, there was some discussion sparked over the dress code in the high school, and I thought it was important for students to know specifically if they had something they wanted to bring up with administration on that, how exactly to go about doing that, and then what steps it took to get that to the finish line. So that was the one I chose.
I chose an article that I wrote about 2 months ago, I believe, called Dividing Diversity. It was my editor's column, and it was about, it was basically promoting egalitarianism and equality without, like, scoring or any judgment. And I know that it sparks discussion in many student groups, such as GSA, and I'm just proud of the discussion that it created.
So one of my favorite articles that I've seen when I was on staff was not one I wrote. It was written by Sarah Matthews, who's our feature editor, and she wrote an opinion about test score or taking tests, and it was titled "More Than a Score," I think. And during pitching, like we were talked about doing it as a staff ed, and I was like kind of against it. I think I was probably one of the only people that was really against it. But when I finally saw it in print and I read it, like going into it, I had like kind of the opposite view, but after reading it, I was like, I can't even argue with this. Of course, this is right. So that was really cool.
My favorite article that I've written was also an in-depth. It was the in-depth for the October issue that I wrote with staff writer Maggie Osterhaus, and it was on divorce, which was something that I was a bit nervous to tackle, but I'm very glad that we did because I got to have some real, genuine, good conversations and interviews with students who have been impacted by divorce and just the different ways and that it impacts their lives. And the things I heard about it afterwards were people telling me that it was just very impactful and very well handled, and I was very proud of myself for that.
Thank you. Does anybody have anything else? Thank you very much for coming.
Great job.
Now you have to follow that.
Yeah, I know. I always get the hard part of transitioning from those type of things to back to our meeting. So
I could make it easier on you, but
I know. Why would you start now? So today we had staff in service, and I want to thank Kathleen for being part of some of the discussions at Compassionate Schools and those sessions. Number one question that I got asked today was, what about tomorrow? Because supposedly there's a storm coming. So I thought I'd take a little bit of time to kind of talk through what my thought process is and how I go about where we're at. So yes, I know there's a storm coming. Yes, I know, looking at the different weather reports, not only from the TV stations, but I also subscribe to something from the National Weather Service, and I was on a webinar at 3 o'clock this afternoon, seeing what their latest update. They tell me that we're in a region that will get anywhere from 3 to 7 inches of snow. They tell me that it will start having accumulation starting at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning, that it's going to snow all day and into the evening, that it should stop somewhere early morning on Wednesday, excuse me, and that depending on how the storm shifts, Janesville is scheduled to get about 1 to 3 inches, but they have the possibility of getting up to 1/10 of an inch of ice. So you balance that. I also subscribe to Charlie Shortino and Charlie's service. And so Charlie sends me this, and Charlie's prediction to this, and what I like about Charlie is Charlie breaks it down for me of kind of what he figures we're going to get. So Charlie's prediction is we're going to get 4 inches of snow total, with accumulation starting at about 8 a.m., but by 4 we have 1.5 inches. Charlie does not feel that we're going to get ice this far north. In addition, I've talked to the superintendent of McFarland. I've talked to the superintendent of Oregon. We are in contact with the superintendent of Monona Grove. I'm continuing to watch the weather. I have a conference call scheduled at 5 a.m. with the area superintendents to see if things change and how the storm is tracking tomorrow morning. Going through the thought process is everything from, okay, if we have school, what's the safety of the students and the staff? We don't like to really call an early release because that's hectic for our families. Especially if we call an early release for the same day, we need about 2.5 hours to call an early release before we can dismiss, to 1, notify parents, and 2, to get our buses and our bus drivers here so that we can dismiss. And then you always run the risk of we're dropping off young elementary kids to a household that has nobody. So we really don't like the unplanned early releases. So that's something that we consider, but I really don't like calling them, and I haven't called one since I've been here. In addition to this storm that's coming in tomorrow, I'm also paying attention to Thursday, because Thursday evening into Friday morning, there's supposed to be -25 below wind chill. And one report tells me that the high on Friday may be as high as -10 below. So then we have to watch out for the wind chill and what that will do to our students and our staff. And Burke is sitting over there saying, just cancel school for the week.
Yeah, he doesn't get a vote.
Exactly what I said.
Make my life easier and just cancel school for the week. So I thought I'd spend the time that I have just kind of going through kind of what my thought process are and what I look at. There's no easy decision, and so whatever decision I make, I will either come across as a weather savant or schmuck. There's no in between. Whereas the weather forecasters can say there's a chance this may happen or there's not a chance. In this role, we have to make a decision, and you sometimes look to play the odds, and sometimes they work out, and sometimes they don't. And so that's kind of my thought process as I'm working through this, but I thought I'd share that with all of you, just to kind of let you know kind of what I go through to decide this.
And to be clear, that's a decision that we historically have delegated to you.
Yes.
And you alone.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
So if you get it right, it's because we were wise and delegated.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And if you don't get it right,
You don't disappoint
Right.
one of the students out there.
That was enlightening. I used that word Saturday too.
I was trying to decide if we were doing weather puns now. Hoping we
Oh,
weren't.
yeah. I hadn't even thought about that.
It's no time for puns, Steve. Any questions or comments?
Good luck.
I'd
Thank
just
you.
like to say that students will not be mad at you if you can't.
Well
Duly
played.
noted. Neither would staff, to be honest with you.
Maybe you should write that down so you don't forget. Next up is the consent agenda.
I move to approve the January 7th, 2019 regular board meeting minutes as presented. Approve the January 1st, February 5th, 2019 check register and the January 15th, 2019 P card report as presented. We also would like to say thank you to the following individuals and groups and move approval of their donations to the district. $20,000 from Rumslow Law Office for the Thomas Betty Memorial Scholarship. $15,000 from the Rump Law Office for the Martha Logan Memorial Scholarship. $8,000 from the Harold Latin Memorial Scholarship. $150 from the Kigansa Working for Kids Parent Group for Family Literacy Night. $100 from Helen Erin Ronald Lickman for the Angel Fund. $50 from Diane Nuxon for the Angel Fund and Meal for Students in Need. $40 from Kathleen and Charles Tudor. I'm sorry for my pronunciation. For chipping for meals and related cash donation budget adjustment for $43,340. I also move to approve the resignation of Abigail Coons at the end of the 2019 school year.
The consent agenda has been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
By Mr. Jackson. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor of approving the consent agenda, please so signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The consent agenda is approved. Next on the agenda are committee reports. Allison, we have finance tonight. So.
We had finance tonight. We, in addition to looking at financials for November and December, we did a good discussion about the Baird model that helps us kind of predict and shift some variables around what our budget is going to look like for many years out based on either no state aid or some state aid or where that state aid goes. And we just looked at a couple of things that Erica expertly led us through. And that was the majority of the discussion tonight.
Steve, facilities?
Yes, we met on the 15th. Yep. And Luke went through a presentation on the 10-year facilities plan. I guess utilizing the facility study report that I've seen Uline provided for us. So kind of in a summary, looking at the priority work from the facility study, aligning it with priorities for our district, and developing a core team of administrative staff that are going to work on putting pen to paper and kind of drawing out what that 10-year facilities plan looks like. with support from the facility study.
When will that be completed?
Yeah, so we asked that at the next facilities meeting that we would get an update on the core team, who the members are going to be. But it sounded like more than a year to kind of put the facilities plan together. So it's going to be a lot of work, and that's a 10-year plan. So the important thing was, I think, focusing on building maintenance and also long-term plans around, the district growth or lack thereof. And it really needs to be comprehensive and complete. So I think Luke gets that and really wants to put good effort together here.
Was there any discussion of facilities improvements for security?
Yes, that is one of the top priorities for the district.
Can you say a little bit more about what was discussed?
Well, certainly we're moving forward with things like changing locks and emergency alarms and communication systems. Luke talked about some of the work that's been done to date with putting the film on the exterior, not exterior windows, but the in-between entrance windows.
We're also looking at the secured entrances. So, for example, in the high school, when you come in the secured entrance, you're buzzed into the office,
Right.
And before you can get out into the general public, or I shouldn't say general, to the where the students are in that general area, you have to be buzzed out of the office. Our other buildings, you're buzzed in the front door, and there's not a direct line of sight from the person from being buzzed into the door into the office. And so we're doing a study of what it would take to do a secured entrance like it's common at the high school.
How high a priority is that?
I think that's a fairly high priority. I think that is something we got to look at, and we weigh the pros and cons. But I think that's it's something that Luke took the facilities report, and if you remember, EUA identified by colors, red being their priority. Luke then did our own district priority along with that, and Erica helped me with remembering. It was safety was number one.
I have it.
Whatever it is you need to run a building.
Structure, infrastructure, and energy efficiency.
And so he color coded the issues right alongside of EUA. So if it's read by EUA, it could be read by us. So that's a high priority because it's a safety. If it's, it could be the lowest on both of them. And so that is something, while it's on our radar, doesn't match the same priority as something else.
So safety, to your question, safety is at the very top.
Are there any other questions? Joe, ERC?
Yeah, we did meet a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, mainly in preparation for our February meeting with the SEA, and that came about because during bargaining there were things unrelated to compensation that, the SEA mentioned that they would like an opportunity to discuss, and we said, well, this isn't the format for that, but we'd be happy to create a format for that. So they've given us a list of 13, I think, topics that they would like to discuss with the ERC, and we will do that, and may or may not have things to report or recommend to the board following that meeting.
Thank you, Joe. John, has the TIM policies did not meet?
We didn't meet February 4th.
And John, is there any update on your committee?
We have not met. The only update I have is that the co-chair of the ad hoc committee, Nicole Wiesinger, has resigned from city council. So we need to talk to the city and see what direction that committee goes from there.
Thank you. Any questions? Next on the agenda then is Sarah Kemp from the Applied Population Lab to talk to us about the Applied Population Study. Hello.
Hello. So I have a slide presentation here for you. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for coming.
Applied Population Lab has been providing projections for the district about every 3 years on average, and for a long time. I think it's my 4th or 5th visit here, so thank you for having me. So what we're going to do is we're going to first just talk briefly about the past projections from 3 years ago, look at what models were most reliable. I'll explain all the background information that's needed to inform the projections. I'll explain the methodology, and then we'll look at the actual projections and what we might expect going forward for the district. If you look at this, this is just part of this would be the whole table that you have in your report, showing the actual numbers and what we projected and what the actuals were for these 4 models that we provide every time. And so just keep in the back of your mind that the baseline model was the most reliable. I'll be explaining what each model means in a bit. With the high school, no one model really stood out. But in general, the baseline was the best for the other grade groupings and for the district as a whole. So if we look at the total population of the district, you have seen a decline in this 10-year window of about 12.7%. So this is 4K to 12. But if we look at it by grade grouping, there's some differences between the different grade groupings. So if we look at the kindergarten, which would be that top blue line, you've seen about a 12% decrease in this time period. If you look at the middle school, that would be the red line, 16.5%. That's where you've seen the most decline in your enrollment. And then the high school is the yellow at only 10.7%. And then the bottom line is just your 4K. We kind of treat 4K differently, kind of keep it separate from everything because it's not a required program, but we still want to incorporate it into the projections as well. So if we look, we look at kindergarten enrollment. This is a very important component to determine future students as they progress forward. And we look at a 10-year trend, which is that red line declining. But some good news for you. I'm so glad to come in here and have some good news for you, that your kindergarten is showing an increase. So you are seeing a slight increase over this 5-year window more recently. You saw a little bit of a drop last year, but this year you've seen this increase. We also look at kindergarten replacement. Just give that to you as a snapshot to say, okay, how many 12th graders, which is the blue line, this is how many left, and then the following year, how many kindergartners replace that outgoing 12th grade. And you've seen, a smaller number of kindergartners than 12th graders leaving every 10 years. Also in your packet is some information about your open enrollment history. So you see the ins and outs, and then that green bar is the net open enrollment. So you've seen, especially this last year, you saw a drop in your out, and about the same with your in. So that net bumped up a little bit this last year, or this current year. If we look at the birth data, which is very important again to determine future students here at the district, we see a little bit of a good news story too here a little bit, in that the long-term trend is showing decline. Most of your births are in the city of Stoughton, but I do also incorporate these other towns. And if you just look at the 7-year trend, it is declining, but not as dramatically as the long-term trend. So it's a bit of a less of a decline in this 7-year window, and it's been kind of bouncing up and down the last 7 years. We also provide just some municipal population data, the total population of the municipalities within the district. We give you some information on general population in grade group or age structure, and then we also give you some housing data. And so if we look here, the city has grown slightly. The other towns are pretty steady. This is the age structure. Looking at the 2010 census, which is the blue bar, the green is estimates from 2016. It's called the American Community Survey, which is a 5-year survey that the U.S. Census does. So you can see if we look at those younger age categories, you saw a little bit of an increase estimate, for the 0 to 9, but a decrease from the 10 to 19. And then you do see a bump up in that older category at the end there. This is the school district. This is taking school district population as a whole. We also provide this housing information for you. There's a chart that shows, I'm just showing you the housing type. There is also a chart for the municipalities broken out by municipality. The blue line is probably the one you're probably going to be most interested in that those are the single family homes. And another good sign for you is to see that there is this increase in single family homes. Families with children tend to purchase single homes versus being in a multifamily or two-family in general. And so the last 4 years, you've seen a rise in the number of housing units built in the district. And then if I can just share with you how we generate these projections, we use a grade progression ratio method or a cohort survival method. So we're progressing the students from grade to grade. We calculate out each of those annual ratios, and then we average those for our different models. So the baseline is a 10-year average, and then you have a 5-year average and a 2-year average to do the other two trends to provide those ratios. And if we look at those, so what we do is we look at taking that ratio and multiplying it by the current, and I apologize, those dates, that should actually be 17 and then 18. I didn't update the years that are on that example, but what you're doing is you're taking it from one grade, how many do you have in first grade this year, multiply it by that ratio, determine the second graders for next year. So if we look at the grade progression ratio in chart form, you see the gray, which is the baseline, has been pretty close to 1. Anything at 1 is, equal in, equal out. So anything above the line is in migration. Anything below the line is an out migration of that particular grade grouping. So your 2-year trend has dropped a bit, comparing it to the other two, comparing the 5-year and the 10-year. So that means that, I'll explain how that translates into your projection numbers. This is also, like I mentioned before, we look at 4-year-old kindergartners, separate them out to say, okay, what is your birth to 4K ratios? It's averaging around 76 to 78% of the area births enter into 4-year-old kindergarten. And so those corresponding ratios for the baseline 5-year and 2-year are used in the corresponding models. The 4K to K, we do not use those ratios for any of the models, but I just provide them for you so you can see what those ratios look like. So the baseline model, again, takes that 10-year grade progression ratio average to determine the grades 1 through 12. And then I take that long-term birth trend, which if you remember was declining, to project future kindergartners. The 5-year and the 2-year trend uses their corresponding 5-year, 2-year grade progression ratios, grades 1 through 12. But we use that recent birth trend, which was not declining as much, to determine future kindergartners for those two models. All 3 of those first models are using births to project kindergartners. The kindergarten trend is a little different in that we're not using birth data, and we're just looking at that 5-year recent trend and use that to inform future kindergartners. So we use that recent kindergarten trend to project future kindergartners. And then we use the 5-year grade progression ratios, grades 1 through 12. So we'll get to the heart of it, which I'm sure you're most interested in. So if we look, this is showing you, I provided the numbers here on the bottom, but we're looking at those 4 models and seeing the kindergarten trend showing pretty much steady enrollment, and the baseline and 5-year decline, and then the 2-year showing the most decline of the 4 models. If we look at it by grade grouping, because we're using that kindergarten trend to inform the kindergartners, our kindergarten trend model shows an increase, while the other 3 models show, over the next 5 years, pretty steady enrollment for your elementary grades. And then if we look at middle school, drop next year, followed by pretty steady enrollment, except for that, again, that 2-year trend stands out because your grade progression ratios for the middle school really dropped the last couple of years, and so that model kind of stands out. Whether that's going to be a pattern going forward is a little bit more difficult to say because it's only 2 years of history or enrollment. And then if we look at high school, we see a steady, slight increase next year, follow with some decline. And as those, middle school, those smaller classes in middle school progress to high school, we would expect some decline there, but then followed up with steady enrollment. So if we look at the future trends, as I mentioned, that baseline model was the most reliable from past projections. And if we look at the new projections, we see the 2-year trend showing the greatest amount of enrollment decrease, while the kindergarten trend model shows steady enrollment for the district as a whole. If we look at it for the district, so depending on which model you look at, you're looking at about a 4 to 10% decrease in the next 5 years. I always point out that 5-year window is more reliable. The further out you go, the less reliable the projections are. So, and you do these projections every 3 to 5 years. So that's a good window to continue to update them. If we look at the elementary grades, again, depending on which model you look at, this is where we're seeing the most variability. So anywhere between a decline of 3% to an increase of 6% in the next 5 years. And the middle school, you'll see a decrease with a decline anywhere between 10 to 21%. And then finally, the high school, decreasing enrollment in the short term with, followed up with some steady enrollment anywhere between 10 to 13%, a decline, a little less than the middle school in the next 5 years. And I can take questions.
Steve? Let me try to find the slide so I can.
And I can back it up too if you want me to.
Well, it had to do with the 4K.
Okay.
Of 76 to 78%, I think.
Yep, that's this one. Yeah.
And do you do modeling for other districts that have 4K programs?
Yes.
And I guess my question is, what do you see as far as typical enrollment for 4K, and why not utilize that, projecting forward?
Right. So in terms of these ratios are fairly similar to most of the districts. Okay. I can say there's definitely outliers where there might be a little bit higher, more to 80 to 85%. But these are pretty typical. And the reason why I don't is because, because it's not a program that's required by state, but kindergarten is. You're not really going to be able to capture the students. So what I have found when I've tried to do that and incorporate them, I end up either usually over projecting, like they're not really realistic models, and so that's why I've tended to stay away from doing that because you probably have a 4K person here who's 4 years old but doesn't show up, and yet they will come to kindergarten.
So would you anticipate that changing if we had a year-round 4K program? Would you readjust, even though, okay, so your point of it being not required, but if you had a 4K program, again, it might not be required, but it's not year-round, full day. Sorry, full day.
Yeah, full day. Yeah. I think, I think it's a possibility. It's also a possibility for a district as yourself because you've had the program for so long as well, right? Like, so many of my districts, there's only a few years of history there, and so it's a newer program, and so that also is something that, I could consider doing because one, because you have, because you have program for quite some time now, and then you could maybe look at doing that. I certainly could provide it, and just with the caveat that it may or may not be as accurate as the other models. But
thank you.
Yeah.
You should apply for housing development. Is that just useful as a supplemental indicator, or is that included in your models?
It is just supplemental. Okay. So I do not have I have provided for some districts a housing development or residential development model that would look at ratios of how many students are you receiving based on the number of housing units you have, and have a ratio and calculate that out. I tend to, when I've done that, it's usually districts that are really growing with a lot of housing development. And so, the speed of which their growth is occurring is pretty dramatic. And so they ask me to look at that where there's many housing developments.
And what kind of decisions might they use that information to?
Well, it's just another model that you can compare it with these other traditional models that we provide. And also what has happened with that model for me in the past is it's a little trickier because of it being more volatile to housing market economies, that they tend to again, that's another model that sort of over projects sometimes a little too ambitious, that a district will think there's going to be lots of growth, and it takes some time before you see students from housing as well. So.
And the analysis that you've done for other districts, is that typically publicly available? Like, we have all of these plots that we just put on our website for the open access meetings. Can we find that information
and I can
for
provide
other areas?
Some of the
really?
districts that we've worked with on that.
That'd be great. Thank you.
I do have one more. On the open enrollment, could you explain again how that is used in projections?
Well, what we do is the enrollment that I use is the third Friday seat count. So it is taking into consideration the students that are open enrolling and sitting in seats.
So you're not taking.
Correct, Erica?
Yeah. you're not taking like the net.
It's not the net. Yeah.
Okay.
So and it's not the outs.
Right.
So the outs are gone, and only the ins are added to your residents that are attending, and that's the total.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're not projecting. We're just taking those numbers and saying that's part and parcel of the data set. We're not projecting anything off of that.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
It's just a number.
It's just
Okay.
and then it's so that chart and table is there just so that you can see the differences there. But yeah.
Something to work toward.
I have a question. You had mentioned that the grade progression ratios for the middle school had dropped the last 2 years. What does that mean?
I don't know.
No, you misunderstand my question.
Okay, so what it means for me when I look at that is I see, so the ratios have decreased. So let me go back to this slide. All right. So if you look at the baseline, the 5-year and the 2-year. So for example, this K-1 on this chart, you see baseline and 5-year is above 1, And so it means there's an in-migration, you're getting more first graders than you had kindergartners on average from the year before. Whereas the 2-year trend, it's below 1, it's 0.98, meaning you've had less first graders than kindergartners in that 2-year average.
Okay.
So that, yeah, and so I don't have the middle school in this chart, but you do have a full table provided for you. You'll see that there as with that middle school group, that drop has happened. There's
So
below 1.
okay, so that means that fewer kids than we anticipated are making the transition from elementary school to middle school.
Correct. And you're also from one middle school grade to the next, so from 6 to 7, you're seeing also a drop, students leaving.
Okay. And it's beyond the scope of what we asked you to do to tell us where they went.
Correct. I've never ever
Okay,
told my years of
no,
doing
I'm
that.
just trying to.
I wouldn't know how to get at that
Yeah.
exactly. So yeah.
And do they come back for high school then, according to your numbers?
I don't know if they're necessarily coming back per se, but the numbers the ratios do increase. So if you look here, this one, so you see, 8, 9, you see a bump, and those ratios increase. You get a drop in 9, 10, but 10, 11, and 11, 12, you see an increase. So yeah, so definitely that answers your question. 8, 9, you're seeing an increase, whether it's the same students coming back or new students from somewhere. I can't say.
Okay, no,
but,
and that's super fair. And
yeah.
I appreciate you clarifying that. Have you seen a pattern like this in your work for other districts?
I don't normally.
Okay.
Don't normally. Yeah. I usually see, well, and it's, and you haven't really seen it either. I mean, this is a recent thing.
Okay.
That 2-year trend is recent. Your baseline and your 5-year looks pretty good. You know, those are much higher. So, but yeah, usually I typically don't see a pattern like that. Usually a little bit of one, but not as dramatic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there?
I was going to ask the same thing about that. It's kind of weird, but so would it be possible to compare the open enrollment out per grade and see if there is a tendency?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
there just a
And I
growing?
didn't. Yeah, that's a good point. Could look at that and see if that's affecting. And I think the chart. Let me see what the chart. If I can find it here. Yeah, I think you only gave these to me for the total. I don't have it broken out by grade, but we could. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you did it in the totals that you gave me, but I don't have a chart in here for you by grade to see if that's happening.
And is it also broken down by demographics by chance? Or not?
No,
No,
it's
no,
just total.
I was just curious. Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you very much for your time. Thank you. So next on the agenda, we have a discussion of the mental health grant. And we have Kelly and Ann. Hi, Yale.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, good.
Come and tell us about the mental health grant.
Well, first
Probably-
I'm going to introduce Ann Simright. She is our coordinator of the grant. So she's going to join me in the presentation.
The one thing that we would ask is if you could get a little closer to the mic so the sound system will pick it up.
And then I'll just kind of go back and forth. So wait till it comes back. But first of all, I wanted to start with a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It's MLK Day. So what I wanted to quote was life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? So I thought that's area of service, and that's what we do all the time for our students and their families. And that's part of what the mental health grant is all about. That's not the right one.
That's the wrong.
Yeah, that's right. There you go. Okay, thanks. All right. So basically, the work we're doing with the mental health grant, we applied for and received that mental health grant from DPI in the sum of $66,000. We started the application process in the spring of 2018, and DPI accepted our application in July of 2018. And what we did is we began our work looking at our Dane County Youth Risk Survey. So this just gives us an idea on how students reported out things like feeling anxious, worrying, depression. Self-harm is more cutting. It's not suicidal, but it's self-cutting self-harm, and then suicidal ideation. So this is helping us determine we had a need around mental health for our students. Again, students reported out witnessing bullying incidents, reported making fun of other students. You can look at all this data, but this really made us feel that we had to pursue the mental health grant to support our kids.
Just, sorry to interrupt, but to be clear, this is Dane County. This is not Stoughton.
This is our data.
This is our data?
Our
Yep.
Stoughton?
This is our Stoughton
So
data.
the first slide, the mental health slide, and the second slide?
Yep, this one. This is all our high school, when it's marked high school, obviously high school, middle school, yes. This is the Stoughton
Really?
data.
Wow.
Good question. Okay, so then after we really determined the need, we went and did a mental health needs assessment. Rand's going to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so as Kelly was saying, we had a quick turnaround. So I think we had about 6 weeks from the time that we learned about the DPI mental health grant to the time that we needed to identify our gaps and our needs, and then write the grant. So we worked with our Compassionate Schools team, and our team identified administration, staff, and pupil services team members at each building to take a mental health needs assessment. And I believe that this assessment was done a couple of years ago as well, but we wanted to have an updated needs assessment. So really looking at what our staff, administration, and pupil services teams see as a need in the district. And from then, we gathered that data, and the Compassionate Schools team put together and prioritized what the needs were. And that's what you can see up on the screen. What we identified the most is the need for direct mental health services in our schools, partnering with a community mental health provider to provide those critical services for our students. And really what we were talking about is that many students have barriers to accessing those services. Barriers such as a lack of transportation, perhaps the parents have difficult time getting off of work. It may be a difficult time navigating the system, even making those appointments. So we thought by bringing a community mental health provider into our schools, we could eliminate those barriers as well as decrease the amount of time that students are out of the classroom. Time away, traveling to and from appointments, maybe being out a half a day or longer. So we really wanted to make sure that those critical services are put in the hands of our students. We also identified a need to align our social emotional learning in grades K through 12. There's a lot of really great work that's been happening already surrounding social emotional learning in all of the schools. We wanted to really put that together and see how it all aligns across the schools, across the grade levels. Professional development. This is my second year in the district, and I have to say, coming here, I was very impressed with all of the good quality professional development that was already happening. So we looked at what was already happening and how can we enhance what is already happening. So that would be universal professional development for all staff, as well as looking at more specialized professional development for our pupil services team to really enhance our skills. I'm also a school counselor at River Bluff Middle School. So to enhance those skills, because we often are the ones who provide supports for students in the schools while they're accessing those community mental health supports. The last one is really important. We really wanted to bring families, students, caregivers into this conversation, hear their voice, see what they think would be beneficial for mental health services, all the way from prevention to intervention to treatment. Go to the next one. So this is the overarching goal. It's to increase the capacity of school staff and community partners to improve youth and family access to mental health services and supports. So there's a big continuum with mental health. It starts from well to becoming unwell, and recovery. And we wanted to make sure that in our schools and with our community mental health providers that we address that entire continuum. So that would mean prevention services, intervention services, and treatment. So we have 5 objectives with this project. The first objective is really the biggest one, and this is one that is required by DPI. It's to increase collaboration with community mental health providers, to increase access to services. And so the timeline for that is that we sent out letters to, I believe, about 10 area mental health providers, and then we reached out and followed up. We had some providers who reached out to us after receiving the letter. And then we met with some of the mental health providers. So right now what we're looking at is partnering with, we haven't heard from everyone yet. We know for sure one is, two for sure. Yep. And we're waiting on the third one. So for sure we're gonna have 2 mental health providers providing services in our schools and possibly 3. And we've identified what their specialties are. Some prefer to work with different grade levels or different buildings. So we'll have a lot of different professionals who can provide services to our students. Also looking at putting together a memorandum of understanding, so an agreement between the school and the mental health providers, and really outline roles and responsibilities for us as well as community mental health providers. We'll be looking at a referral process. So how do we refer students to these community mental health supports that will be providing services in our schools? We'll be meeting regularly with our partners to ensure that all parties' needs are being met, so that the students' and families' needs are being met, the community mental health providers, as well as ours. And then also, if there are any glitches in the system, any challenges, make sure that we address those right away. The ultimate goal being that the needs of our students are met. And then the last one, creating safety plans and re-entry plans for students. So have a template that we can use throughout the district, and we would do this in collaboration with our mental health partners. A safety plan would be for a student who is experiencing a mental health challenge or a mental health crisis. So perhaps how do they feel when they're experiencing this challenge? What are good supports for them? And identification of individuals who are helpful both in the school, community, and at home. And also a re-entry plan template for students who are hospitalized for mental health problems and come back into the school. We want to have a re-entry plan so that they can be very successful when they come back.
And we determined 3 local providers just because we wanted to make sure everyone has the capacity to meet the needs that we have. So, I mean, staff are really concerned. They want all students to be able to access these services. So we wanted each mental health provider to have that capacity to provide what was needed.
And the providers that we talk to are very excited. They're very passionate. They care a lot about students and families and bringing these services into the schools.
So the second objective is to really increase that collaboration of school, community staff with parents and students. So we get more feedback from everybody. We're working towards this, so looking at town hall meetings for education on mental health, trauma-informed care, impact of trauma, things like that. So I know we've worked with the Stoughton Wellness Coalition, as well as I had a meeting with the Stoughton Hospital that they said, hey, if you even want to have one of your town hall meetings, we can supply the space for you. We can get the word out. We want to know what the schools are doing so we can support you in any way. We want to increase parent participation on the Compassionate Schools team, and really also have more students involved in that discussion as well.
So as part of this, again, I mentioned that there was already a lot of really great work going on in the district in terms of social emotional learning, but we want to do a crosswalk. So DPI has a social emotional learning competencies. So we want to do a crosswalk K through 12 to see what is already being implemented. And that might be, oh yes.
What's a crosswalk?
Yep, it's looking at the competencies. So again, DPI has social emotional learning competencies. So looking at those competencies and looking at the curriculum that is being offered and how those match up and how those are meeting the competencies that DPI has set out for the state.
Kind of like standard, like our educational, our academic standards, the social emotional competencies are for social emotional side instead of the standard.
Right, and that could be social skills, could be understanding emotions, regulating emotions, goal setting, growth mindset. Those are some of the social emotional learning competencies. So it's not only looking at social emotional curriculum such as Second Step, which is being implemented in grades K through 8. It's also looking at things like health curriculum, what's being implemented. There might be a 10th grade English class where they're reading a book that would be addressing some of these social and emotional learning competencies. So this is going to take some time, but we've really started doing some of that work and delving into that. Second Step at River Bluff Middle School. So the elementary schools have been providing Second Step, which is a social emotional learning curriculum, for quite a while. The middle school did use Second Step a few years ago. It was very outdated. So then as part of the grant, we did put in the updated web-based version. So right now, River Bluff is implementing Second Step 2 days a week. Homeroom teachers are implementing every Monday and Wednesday. Monday is the lesson, and then Wednesday is an advisory challenge or an advisory meeting, and again during homeroom, and it really supplements and enhances the Monday Second Step lesson. We also identified, as you saw with the data, a need for some bully prevention programs. The elementary school had been doing Second Step bullying prevention for quite some time, and we decided at the middle school we need to put something together as well. It's really educating our students, talking about definitions, talking about strategies not only for targets of bullying behavior, but also those who are bystanders who see it happening, how they can intervene. So we're using a curriculum called Bully Proofing Your School, and we're implementing probably about 4 or 5 lessons this year, and we just hope to increase that.
So the fourth objective is really providing professional development for our own staff to really focus on some of those tier 2, tier 3 small group individual curriculum for our staff, for those students who are really experiencing social and emotional behavioral difficulties. So the grant is going towards a lot of this training. So we're going to have DBT, that's dialectical behavioral treatment training for schools in the summer. That'll take place in late June. Heart math training, we're actually sending one of our social workers for heart math, which is heart math is a way they monitor your heart and then you implement strategies to help you calm down, things like meditation. So we are training someone in February, and she'll bring that back because she's a trainer of the trainer, and she'll bring back that to our staff. We just had bounce back training today and half day tomorrow, and that is like our CBIT at the middle school. So it's cognitive behavioral therapy for trauma in schools, but bounce back is for kindergarten through 5th grade. So it's for our younger students. So we'll have a continuum of trauma intervention when students need it. We're going to do some resource mapping, review our district suicide risk assessment policy as we go through some of the Neola policies. We're going to establish that data that we need to monitor and adjust those interventions, and research suicide prevention screener this year.
So a lot of what we're talking about here, a lot of the trainings, the professional development, it's really an enhancement of what has already taken place. We nurtured heart, Ross Green, collaborative proactive solutions, trauma sensitive schools, So this is, again, we're using this to braid already what is happening, as well as collaborating with Stoughton Wellness Coalition, who funded Safe School Ambassadors at the middle school, and doing town hall meetings with them, so really working with our partners. So the fifth objective is to increase the collaborative training efforts between our school and community, and then also bringing in parents, guardians, and caregivers as well, and providing some of these professional development opportunities, educational opportunities for them as well. So the Compassionate Schools team is looking at a 3-year professional development calendar. We want to identify coaching supports, because having a professional development is great, but we don't want it to be a one and done. So how can we increase implementation of the strategies learned during these professional development opportunities? Youth mental health first aid is very near and dear to my heart. In fact, we had a training today. We trained 55 educational assistants in grades K through 12, and this is a 7 or 8 hour training, and it is identifying mental health concerns that are typical that we may see in a young population. It's also looking at how to interact with a young person who is experiencing a mental health challenge or crisis, and implementing a 5-step action plan to use in both crisis and non-crisis situations. So we had that today, and then we will offer 2 additional trainings in June, and we want to open that up not only to school staff, but also community members, parents, and guardians. Trauma-sensitive schools, trainer of trainer. Through the grant, we will send 1 person to receive this training, and they will come back from St. A's in Milwaukee and be able to provide this training to staff. And we're using this to braid, I believe, some other people will be going through another grant?
Through Title IV, we also have money available. So we're hoping to send I'm hoping 4 people to be trainers of the trainer for trauma-sensitive schools. And then they can come back and continue all the work around professional development with trauma.
So then as part of the grant, we had wrote in some trauma-sensitive schools training offered this summer, again, offering that to not only staff, but parents, guardians, and community members. And the last thing is attendance at the DPI Social Emotional Learning Conference, which is fairly new. It's now 3 days, and the first day is called Growing School Mental Health. So they bring in people to talk about best practices, which we're excited about, because starting this practice in our school, then we can learn and grow from them. Any questions for us?
Sorry, but I have a few. I was wondering if it's possible, not to do it tonight, but could you somehow provide us a list of all of the mental health, trauma-informed care type programs that we have in the district? Because it's like, I know we have a lot, and I know you've listed and mentioned some, but I cannot keep track of them. So if there's some inventory of all the programs that because we're doing a lot, and we're spending a lot of time and resources, and it would just be nice, for me anyway, I don't know if anybody else feels this way, but I know we have building bridges, and I know we have all these things. It would just be nice to just kind of point to them. Oh, these are all the things we're doing. That would be wonderful.
Okay, absolutely.
Can I go back to one of these slides? If you see the resource mapping on there, that is one of the activities that we'll be doing through the grant. And you're not the only one, because I think, staff, we all need to ensure that, what's at the universal level, what are all students and staff getting, what's the tier 2 and the tier 3 level. So that resource map will really help tease all that out.
Also, I'm a 4K guy, so like we're doing K through 12. What are we doing in the 4K program? And so maybe we could think about reaching out to the 4K staff. And I know historically we, as a district, we've kind of said, well, we don't run that program, but we certainly fund it, and we have curriculum, and we have lots of other PD going on.
We actually did nurtured heart training for our 4K.
I guess I'm specifically thinking about this.
Well, Nurtured Heart is a social emotional support for kids.
Okay.
So Nurtured Heart falls right into it. It's really a great strategy. Almost, it can be either a tier 3 or, universal strategy of language to use with kids.
And when you say tier 3, you're talking about PBIS tier
Actually,
three,
no,
or?
tier 3 is the highest, but actually, when you think of nurtured heart approach, it's research-based and it's for really challenging behavioral kids.
Okay.
But we found it so effective even at that universal tier language. So they were provided a training I think at the end of the summer, Amy Ruck provided a training there and doing some coaching around using that language with kids.
I just have to say that, and I reached over to Yoli and just said, no, those are Dane County numbers, that's not us. No, that blew my mind. This is sad. This is extremely sad. So thank you for doing the grant, and thank you for putting all the effort in and making, the student as healthy as possible. So, is it a 1-year grant?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There might be opportunities for more, I know. Ann was just telling me, I'm like, ooh, a lot of work.
Thank you very much.
Tim?
Yeah, I echo what Steve said. Thank you for the work you're doing. I'm hearing a lot of good things. My question is around, we spent some time on Saturday looking at data related to proficiency in reading and math, and I come from the viewpoint that learning, academics, anything is a social emotional process. So what's being done? I have two questions. One is what's being done to sort of marry these two things together. I hear you're doing the second step, and I have different feelings about that program, quite frankly. But that's a separate. The academic teachers are teaching that, right? So like a math teacher could be teaching that as well as math, and I think that's fine. But what is being integrated into the regular core instruction in, say, a math class or a reading class? Because I work with some fairly difficult students in my work, and the thing I've learned in trying to help them get concepts is it's not necessarily just a skill set deficit. It could be an emotional or social deficit that we have to address to help them understand that, because we had a very robust discussion about we have to improve our academic performance. So how are we going to marry that, for lack of a better word, or what are your thoughts on that? Because I know that's beyond maybe your realm of being able to do anything about it, but how are we going to do that without it necessarily, the social emotional curriculum being this standalone curriculum that you deliver, and it's one more thing for our academic teachers to do, versus them really finding what the needs of our kids are to help them improve academically. So I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. I was actually having a discussion with a teacher at Sandhill today about that, how to integrate some of these pieces within. And the new reading curriculum really allows for some of that. So what kind of books are we reading? We can still hit some of the teaching points and the mini lessons by really specifically picking or choosing books that might emphasize some of these social emotional competencies. So we're trying to tweeze them together. Even the high school staff was doing an assessment for the social emotional competencies, trying to think of, okay, so where is this occurring in the classroom really naturally? How much can we talk? So I think the work is there, trying to intertwine it all together. I think it can be done rather than just a separate curriculum all the time. Even some of those strategies like Nurtured Heart, everybody can use those strategies, and that builds those social emotional skills. So if you catch a child, I really love the way you're watching me read right now. That shows how excited and what a great learner you are. So you're really defining those character traits, and that is done throughout the school day. Teachers are using that. I know they've had a lot of great success at the middle school using that language and then incorporating it into the PBIS structure. So is it 100% intertwined? It isn't right now, but there's a lot of discussion around what that will look like. I don't know if you have more to offer.
This was a conversation that we had with our pupil services team this fall, is exactly that. How do we integrate this more into every day, every classroom, the building community as a whole, as well as how do we generalize these skills that are learned so they're not just standalone skills. So these are conversations that have been started, and we're talking about them. How I mentioned the one and done. We want to make sure that professional development and the curriculum that we're using is not just a one and done. So if we can use coaching in any way, like we're using Nurtured Heart, and these are some conversations that we can have maybe when we reapply for the mental health grant. We want to look more at coaching
Or the morning meetings, that's incorporated in the day about, the work around responsive classroom is very integrated into the school day.
Yeah, I would add the work that's being done with play-based learning as well.
Yeah.
That in and of itself is
Absolutely.
teaching kids at an early age the importance of the social emotional piece as they prepare for more rigor in academics. So I'm really encouraged by that at that early age. That's all I have.
Allison?
I'm really encouraged to see, and we've been talking about building this for a long time and just a lot of different programs, and I really like what we have, what you've outlined that would include the community, because I felt like that was always one thing. It's like, well, yeah, we can do this, but this seems like it's something that would benefit everyone. So that's great to see. And I'm just kind of wondering, have you thought yet about how we're going to like get the word out and what's worked?
That isn't, we haven't planned it out completely, so I think that's next time, after we get, because we are in the process of getting those community mental health providers and a lot of those other pieces in. So as soon as we write that MOU and get that all set, I think that's next on our line. I'm actually gonna talk with our Building Bridges staff, because they have a lot of training that they've done to emphasize community partnerships and trauma-informed care. So I'm hoping to involve them in on the professional development that we seek out into the community. So, but we'll work with Stoughton Wellness Coalition and the hospital on that to get that established.
I was just going to respond to her question, sort of. In the Nurtured Heart community training that you had last week, there were probably 70 to 80 families or individuals there. So, I mean, the word is getting out. I thought that was a good turnout.
Yeah, I thought it was awesome. They did another one late in the summer too, and I don't think they had as many parents, but that I thought was an excellent turnout. Yeah.
Are all the staff exposed to that too, or is it an optional?
The Nurtured Heart training was, it started last school year, and it was a sectional that they could choose. Okay. So.
My turn now. I don't have a question. I really want to say thank you, and to give you kudos for all the work that you guys are doing. Thank you so much for applying for the grant. And I know Kelly since you got here, you've been so on top, and I think you've been very organized, because this is a lot. And I have seen, and I have the privilege, I guess, of serving on the compassionate school team. And I have seen how it's so much, but it is so well planned. I have a lot of hope in that this is really going to be, like your question, integrated, because it's a good training from every staff, how to manage the mental health that we have problems. I mean, we also, I think, in the very, very beginning of the compassion school, when we transitioned from poverty task force into this, I remember we talked about the mental health for the staff too. I mean, because they are under a lot of pressure with, you have all these kids in the classroom that have so many different needs. And there's something that probably years ago a teacher wouldn't have gone through. Right. I think that is also incorporated into this, in the collaboration among all the teachers and the rest of the staff. So I think, yes, there is a lot on the plate, but I see like it's so well organized, and it's going like step by step. And I also feel so good about the fact that you guys are reaching out to the community, and that's another thing that we've been talking at the Compassion School team. How do we include the community, right? So that's why we have that little group. So thank you, and I don't know, just thank you for everything you guys are doing.
you. A lot of passionate staff are doing a lot of the heavy lifting within that group. So they're amazing.
Yeah.
Anything else, anyone? Thank you very much for
Yeah,
coming.
thank you.
At this point, let's take a 5-minute recess, please. We'll be back here at 8:35. I know.
Crazy sheets are closed for tomorrow.
Every
What?
word.
Dr. Onsager, Prairie du Chien School's already closed tomorrow.
You are.
Just keeping you updated.
Thank you, I appreciate
No, 7 to 3 tonight. So that was nice. Yeah. Yeah, that was nice. A little, it was a struggle for a lot of our kids. Oh my God, there was that
Now you can tell it to everybody the process we go through.
That I will report on that.
You even have Charlie's little sheet that he gave me today.
And then Dr. Onsager goes home and doesn't sleep.
Yeah. He'll update you.
Yes.
We'll get 8 inches instead of 5.
Oh, yeah.
Right. That's how it all goes.
Yeah.
I'm a lot more relaxed when it's Friday night storm.
Oh, sure.
Although,
Oh, an extra week of school. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, they're not trusting.
They've already taken 3 this year. Yeah. 1 from ice, and then 2 from that. Or 2 from ice and then 1 from that. And the school district is like the biggest in the state area-wide. That's why. Yeah. Even though it's a school of 2,000 people total, it's that.
I tell them.
Yeah, you're there. Oh, gotcha.
Jill?
Yeah.
Leach that went to Royal.
Jill was Jill. They're an understanding of it.
Yeah. I went to the wedding. I've been to so many teachers' weddings. Let me tell you.
Refresh.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I know. No, there's no.
are you going tomorrow?
Recess is over. I always wanted to say that. So we will invite Laurel to come and talk to us. Hi, Laurel.
Hello. I was like, oh, at least everybody's refreshed, right?
Yeah. You know, I will tell you that you would much rather have a little break
Probably.
than have everybody sitting here going,
Like, oh my gosh.
yeah, we're back now. We're all
Well,
dialed in.
usually Becky does my clicking, but if I can give an injection, I probably can handle this, right?
All right.
So, wish me luck. Okay.
Watch
Super
out.
famous last words.
Yes. Well, I'm Laurel Griedebeck. I'm the district nurse, and it's been my pleasure to serve the district. This is my 22nd year. Wow, time flies. So this is the Health and Nursing Services report for the past school year. And there will be a few little things about this school year too, just because I can't put a lot of great pictures in because of confidentiality, but I do have a few, so I'm happy about that. So the first, oh, I better multitask, okay. All right. So this just, you have a detailed report also in your packet. So this is, I'm the district nurse, so I'm the full-time nurse. We have a wonderful health staff comprised of our health assistants, and we have 2 full-time at the high school, well, no, 1 at each. So full-time at high school and middle school, and then we have 4 part-time. Fox Prairie has 2 part-time, they kind of share the week. And we have, I should clarify that they're not all part-time, but they have part-time health responsibilities. So at Kegonsa and Sand Hill, they do part health plus some other responsibilities. So we do have a registered nurse that has a student assignment as well, and our medical advisors, the Dr. Merwin, Dr. Tom, as he's better known, he's been our medical advisor since I started, so for 22 years. So thankful for him and the help he gives. And I just want a little brief overview of, oh, see, I got a multitask here. We have 473 students with significant health conditions, and that is up from last year. Last year it was 366, so quite a bump this year. And some of the health conditions, the biggies are asthma, diabetes, seizure disorders, life-threatening allergies. I consider life-threatening anybody who has an epinephrine injector or some type of a auto injector for an emergency, as well as we have 202 students with other significant health conditions, and those might range from heart conditions, cancer, multi-system disorders, and then this also just goes into we do a lot of health procedures in the school. And I'm grateful for the health staff that I train and delegate to, and they take awesome care of the students when I can't be everywhere. So they are my eyes, and they do a great job. So putting a plug in for all those great health assistants. So. All right, this is our health room usage report. You can see we are definitely up in the number of our health room visits this year, and those numbers are up, total visits in all of the school buildings this year. And mainly, looking back, it's kind of not always easy to pull the data and figure out exactly why. Sometimes you can say, well, there was an outbreak of this or that or the flu or something. Generally, it's because there are students with health conditions and it warrants a scheduled visit, it warrants multiple visits as needed. So mainly it's because of those health conditions that we know about. And also, I was kind of looking also, and while I don't have hard data, I have quite a bit of anecdotal information that says there's some social, emotional, mental health needs. And a lot of times those needs present themselves as physical symptoms. And so we're helping, we don't maybe always know it, but we're helping those students as well in the health room. You can see that we do have emergencies, 911 calls, and accident reports, they're down, so that's good. And sometimes just to clarify, We do an accident report anytime a student goes home. That doesn't necessarily mean that there's, the parent might choose to take them home. And for sure, if we do send them by ambulance or send them, recommend urgent care or ER for them. Next slide, I'm happy to report that we have and still are and always have been in compliance with immunization. So, through a lot of hard work of a lot of people and parents, of course. Whoops. Okay. Health screenings with the help of volunteers. We do screenings of 4K, kindergarten, second grade, and fourth grade. And we do hearing screening of mainly kindergartners and vision of the other grades. And also, those typically happen in the fall. We have a great partnership for quite some time with the Lions and Lioness Club, and they're awesome to work with, as well as we have a lot of community partners and parents that come and help us. Otherwise, it would probably take us all year long to get it all done. And so that process is really nice. And of course, anytime a parent or a staff member has a concern, hearing-wise or vision, I'm glad to do isolated screenings anytime. Health education, just a sample of the training. I mainly am focusing on staff training, making sure that we are prepared if there is an emergency on site, as well as field trips. Lots of great field trips, so making sure that those students are taken care of with all school-sponsored events and activities. Able to go into talk with students about health careers, obviously nursing, so I'm happy about that. Putting out information to parents in e-news, as well as working with UW-Madison nursing students, which has been really fun for me, and hopefully they've enjoyed the experience. So far, so good. And tomorrow, I have a new student, so I'm looking forward to meeting him. No, Wednesday, new student. All right, a sampling of, there is paperwork involved, so I do a lot of assessments and do the nursing process to develop emergency action plans, health plans, medical management plans, work closely with healthcare providers, nurse practitioners, doctors to make sure that the needs of the students are taken care of, and then coordinating and communicating and the health assistants help with those tasks to make sure teachers know. So it's a huge group effort to take care of the needs of the students as far as health. Involved with several students with IEPs and 504s. This year I included information about student intervention meetings, and mainly that is regarding attendance and how that impact, how health concerns and their health can impact their attendance, and how I can help and how we can help as a team to help students be in school. Just an outline of some of not only what I'm involved in as far as community involvement, but also the health assistants also involved in a lot of like wellness and safety committees and either building level mainly and health. So this is just some of the community involvement. Yeah, can't talk. And during the 17-18 school year, just a few highlights. I'm obviously very passionate about being prepared for a health emergency, and we received HeartSafe certification to help in the event of a cardiac emergency. Went through Project Adam, Children's Hospital of Wisconsin to receive this certification. We had a lot of things in all the buildings in place for this. It kind of mainly focused on doing some mock medical drills, which is something I've wanted to do, and so this is perfect. And so that was accomplished last year.
And I'm working on one building at a time to continue that process. And we've done some things already with the high school as well as Sand Hill, done some tabletop drills and working on developing like roles and responsibilities and a template for that. This ongoing revisions to DPI required medication training, transferring that over to Schoology in February. I better have that done because it's been 4 years and that's when the knowledge, every 4 years staff have to go through various levels of medication training, the knowledge portion. Every year I delegate and I train on the skills, like actually being able to do the injections and how to take care of an emergency. Talked about partnerships already, always working on, do policies need to be updated, implemented, communicated, as well as always updating the manual, our health services manual. There's always updates and revisions. Things change, trying to keep up with research and evidence-based practice. Picture. So, Aaron said, will we get a banner? And we do. So this is, we did get someone from Project Adam came and presented this banner, and that is just a part of the emergency response team at Kiganza. And we've had several mock surprise drills where I've had a couple of different scenarios, a cardiac emergency, as well as a diabetic emergency, and have had several drills at Kiganza. Not that other schools don't respond to emergencies quite well, but that's just where I've been focused so far. And they've done really well. We do some debriefing, what worked, what didn't, how can we improve. Some goals for this year. Continue to update that manual, always. Schoology we talked about, and revising, working on field trip checklists. I've volunteered to be part of a DPI work group that starts next month about extended field trips, like out of state, out of country. How do we do that? Because there's some delegation and nurse practice. It's kind of complicated, and we're hoping that this will help nurses in this state, but maybe nationally, to figure this, how do we do this in the best, safest way for students. Continue with the medical alert drills, and then awareness, and also just most recently, Stop the Bleed training in November. We developed another partnership with Stoughton Hospital, several nurses there, an EMT, and several of us went over to Mount Horeb EMS and became trainers for Stop the Bleed, which is a national program. Are you familiar with that? Somewhat. I think that was a question I had last year when I was here doing the presentation, and I was happy to say I was working on it, and it's become a reality. So it's kind of part of, it stemmed from some of the school violence and how to, save as many lives as possible, because sometimes what has happened is more lives could have been saved if somebody would have known how to do, the stop this emergency type of bleeding. But it doesn't really have to just strictly do with an episode of school violence. It could be other types of severe injuries and cuts, whether in the workplace or in schools or, out in the community. So we partnered for our first training last week. And it was at Kiganza. So they just happened to have the safety meeting first, so they got on the list. And we have scheduled trainings for the other school as well. And so this is just basically, these show us doing how to apply tourniquets and how to do it so effectively. And we also went into other ways of stopping bleeding. Okay. Any questions?
Yeah.
Get to.
Joel, you
Thank
first.
you.
All right.
So I have a few questions, not as much as many as Steve. How do you manage your time? I mean, you have to be in all the schools. How does it go for you?
I am never, it's always challenging. I am never ever bored, and the time goes by really quickly. And perhaps I work some long hours. I do. I work long hours.
But you have to go to
I
every
go.
school
Oh,
for.
I see what you're saying. I go to every building at least once a week. So I have a schedule each week, and I try to stick to that. And I also put in time, hopefully for office and meeting time. Doesn't always work that way, but I try. And then I also put in time to check up on the 4K sites too. So that's kind of a
Now,
schedule.
Is it? I see that for the health screening, you have vision and
Hearing.
hearing. What about the oral health? Is it mandatory or not?
You know what? I don't think I put that. I might have put that slide in there. If not, it's in your packet. We have that program still, and it did change names. And
I did see
okay.
that you.
Yeah, and I don't feel like I'm an expert on screening for oral health, but that's if parents enroll in that program, and our enrollment was up, so the services were up this past year. So if parents do enroll in that, that is part of what that service. And I hear that's been going on for a number of years. I wish I could remember.
Smiles for Life?
Yeah, Bridging Brighter Smiles. It was Smiles for Life, and that it happened as a coincidence at a annual school nurse conference. I happened to start talking to a lady, and then things.
No.
And the enrollment went up because we put it online.
Okay.
Had that go with connections on the online enrollment.
Sure.
So there's a link that'll take us directly to Bridging Brighter Smile.
Yeah. So that was good. The enrollment was great. Yeah.
And my last question is, for those families in need, that you can determine that they are in need, do you give any information of the health services resources that are available for them? Like, for example, we have the free clinic in Stoughton that they could use. Do you have information for them?
I have resources, but oftentimes I partner with the social workers, which is awesome. It's a great partnership. So for transportation, for resources, and sometimes I have some resources, sometimes they have. So, but we form a really great partnership to help those families and students.
Thank you.
Stop the bleed is something I've been asking about for a while. I'm glad to hear there was training on it.
Yeah.
Will tourniquets or will there be materials for that provided in each classroom or on our school buses?
Glad you asked that. I should have mentioned that. Because we went through this training, there was a grant, and the grant, if we could show that we were having training, even if we just had people signed up and we had dates, and not only that, but we've already had one. Kiganza now has 10 free kits, which so and so 10. Well, that's maybe not enough right now, but that's definitely a start. And then also each school will get 10. So there'll be 10 free kits in each building when we're done with the process. Actually, I have all but one group of 10 in my office right now. So
do you know a rough cost estimate on the kit prices?
I have looked that up when we were looking it up and trying to partner about. I couldn't tell you. I want to say they're at least, if you get the good kind of the appropriate kind of tourniquets. Now I'm going to be guessing, and I hate to guess the wrong number, but I would say they're at least $50, if not more. And like I said, don't quote me on that. I know I should remember that when I was looking it up, but I don't. Yeah. But it's a significant, getting those free was huge. Anything else?
Go.
What does the medical advisor do?
Dr. Merwin, he is a volunteer, so he volunteers his time, and he is a person that I consult with. He is a person that, if there's going to be a policy or procedure change, that is someone I would want to run. He would be one of the resources, one of the persons that would be involved in that process. If there's a question that comes up, as he serves mainly as a resource. And he might also say to me, what about this? What about, this policy change? This is what he'll share information, he's connected with, pediatricians. So he has some resources for me, and he might say, this policy, I think we need to update this one. And we've updated policies based on some information that he has shared with me as well.
Thank you. Allison?
How many, do you have one nursing student for the semester, or would you get more than one?
They've changed it. I used to get one as part of their community health clinical, and I used to get one nursing student per semester. Now they've divided it, so I get two. For about 8 weeks each, and they have X amount of clinical hours they have to do. And just partner, this has been, I don't remember, it's been a couple years with UW-Madison. I've also had UW-Oshkosh and other schools too. It helps keep me on my toes. Really, yeah.
Nothing like having to explain something.
Yeah, that you think you know why you're doing it, but then you have to put it in words. So, yeah.
My textbook says.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are there any other questions, Jill? Thank you very much for coming. It's always a pleasure to see you.
Thanks very much.
Next on the agenda are the WASB resolutions, and Kathleen, you're a delegate, right?
Correct.
How do you want to do this?
I don't know how many people actually looked at what the resolutions are. But, well, I've read through them all, and it's pretty straightforward. I didn't feel like there was anything that would be controversial or where we would probably have any disagreements about how to vote. They're pretty well vetted. The only thing that could come up is that not all the proposed resolutions make it on here, so there will be resolutions that were bypassed, presented, and possibly voted on, but we have no way of knowing which one that'll be, since it's a time-based decision, and also how the district, how strongly they want it addressed.
When is the delegate assembly?
Thursday. Yeah,
Wednesday.
Wednesday. Tuesday evening is a new delegate presentation, or just going over the proposed resolutions in a little more depth and procedural things. So.
Does anyone have questions or comments on any of the resolutions? Joe?
No, I don't. I guess I was just gonna ask Kathleen, what are you looking for from the board tonight?
I was really just looking for, did anybody that glanced over them have any concerns because my reading was, these have already been pretty well spelled out. Some are just to get in alignment with state standards. Some are what we're gonna promote, or what the WASB is gonna promote now in the coming year. But there really wasn't anything that you were like, gee, why are we doing that, or why would that come up? So,
I did have one. Well, we talked about, at the finance meeting, we talked about one of the resolutions that's going to, that's basically to take the student poverty rate as a factor in determining revenue limits, which would, Erica mentioned, would be helpful for us.
Yeah.
But there was another one. It was 1919. It was credentialing for high school staff, and it basically it looked to me like it was well, it says right in the resolution, relaxing credentials for accrediting programs in high schools that have college applicability or credit applicability. And I don't know how, personally, I guess, why would you lower the standards if it's, maybe it's because of resources and staff resources are hard to come by for accredited programs in high school at the high school level. But I'm not sure if that would jeopardize a kid's ability to, move that credit forward, I guess.
I think, yeah, some of it is just population based, I think also.
I read that, Steve, as trying to relax so in order for somebody to be dual certified and to teach the high school class and, let's say a class from Madison College kind of dual certified, the requirement now is they have to have so many hours working in the field. And that's hard for some people to get, that they need, I think it's 400 or more hours that they have to have working in the field in order to get that accreditation. So it's trying to relax some of those total number of hours that they're required to work or volunteer at a business in the field to get that dual certification.
Okay. Well, I guess as long as it wouldn't hurt the students who are taking the class,
right,
that credit would be applicable moving forward in their career, college career, or education path. Okay.
Anyone else? You'll do great.
Yeah.
That's what we've done in the past, is sent somebody that, we were comfortable. I am. I'm sure you're gonna vote exactly as you should.
Thank you.
If something comes up that you want to consult on while you're there, I think you have my cell phone number.
Yes.
I'll be there. You can reach out to me, but there's absolutely no obligation to do that.
All right. Yeah.
We put the discretion in you to, because you think best, and we trust you.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you for serving.
Try to make that work.
All right, next on the agenda is our only discussion action item, which relates to open enrollment seats for 2019-2020. We will need to begin this with a motion.
I move to approve the 2019 to 2020 SASD open enrollment seats as presented, which includes unlimited availability for district regular education seats, 3 second grade special education seats, and 2 third grade special education seats. There are no spaces available for speech and language or special education for any other grade level.
Motion by Ms. Sorg, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Fry. He's closer to
Oh, that's fine.
Let's do it that. Is there any discussion? There's no discussion. Let's go ahead and call the question. Do we need to do this by roll call or no?
I don't think so.
Would you call the roll then, please?
Ms. Fitzgibbon?
Yes.
Mr. Coughlin?
Yes.
Ms. Patterson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Ms. Sword?
Yes.
Mr. Ruban?
Yes.
Ms. Huffey?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
President Sullivan?
Yes. The motion carries. At this point, I want to briefly list the future meetings and events that are coming up. We have regular board meetings on February 4th and 18th. We have the State Education Convention, weather permitting, starting tomorrow and going through Friday in Milwaukee. We have Finance Committee meetings. Next Finance Committee meeting is on March 18th. Policy meets on February 4th and March 4th. ERC meets on February 11th and March 11th. And there's the new teacher dinner on February 4th. Do you all have a meeting set, John?
We do not.
One other thing I'd just like to say very briefly before we discuss going into closed session today is the observance of Dr. King's birthday. This summer, Sheila and I took our younger kids to Memphis. One of the things we saw there was the Civil Rights Museum at the Lorraine Motel where Dr. King was shot. And I was surprised at how much that my kids, who are raised in Wisconsin, in the 21st century, know about Dr. King and know about the civil rights movement, and they've learned that here. And I'm grateful, very grateful, especially today, to the people who've taught them that. At this point, we have reason to go into closed session under WSTAT 1985 sub 1 sub C to discuss evaluation of the district administrator. Can I get a motion, please? Moved by Mr. Fry. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Fitzgibbon. This is a roll call.
Ms. Thor?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Bougon?
Yes.
Ms. Huckey?
Yes.
Mr. Coughlin?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Fitzgibbon? Aye. Ms. Patterson?
Yes.
President Sullivan?
Yes. The board will reconvene in the upper conference room as soon as convenient. Dr. Lansari, if you will join us, please. We will then reconvene in open session before the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.